Begin our session titled Neither a Hawk Nor a Dove, an insider's account of Pakistan's foreign relations, including details of the Kashmir framework by Khurshid Mahmud Kasuri. Participants, Mr. Khurshid Ahmed Kasuri, Sudheendra Kulkarni, Ashraf Jehangir Qazi, and Mehr Tarar to please take their places on the stage. Thank you. Zahid, our moderator for this session is Zahid Hussain. Please. Please. Zahid Hussain is an award-winning journalist and writer. He has been a correspondent for the Times of London and the Wall Street Journal. He also has covered Pakistan and Afghanistan for several other international publications, including Newsweek, The Economist, India Today, and the Associated Press.
Thank you so much and welcome to you all. Neither hawk nor dove is the title of the book, and probably most of you must have seen by now, authored by Mr. Khurshid Mahmud Kasuri, the former foreign minister. It's a voluminous book, I must say, 800 pages. But what is most interesting in the whole book is about the back-channel negotiations, which started in 2004 and continued till 2007. It was the longest back-channel diplomacy between the two countries, and what it had produced, according to the author and other information which are available now, is that the two countries had almost reached an agreement on a formula, draft formula on Kashmir. It seems quite a distant dream today that it could happen, given the existing environment of tension between the two countries. Mr. Kasuri is the most appropriate person to talk on this issue, as he was a witness to that whole back-channel encounter. The thing is that it is the major question at this point of time is that whether we can pick up the thread from there. It was a very significant development. It had happened under the military rule. General Musharraf was the president at that point, but the initiative was taken by both the government. What is most significant about this is that there were two governments in India during that period, and they both were committed to continue that dialogue. It was disrupted, and I think we will like to know why that whole process, so promising for the peace, was disrupted. I'll ask, we have Mr. Kasuri with us, and along with a very eminent panelist, Mr. Ashraf Jehangir Qazi, who was the High Commissioner to India and also Ambassador to Washington, Mr. Sudheendra Kulkarni. He works with Observer Foundation, but you must have heard his name, and he's very familiar in Pakistan after that particular incident which happened in Bombay, where Mr. Kasuri's book was being launched, and he was the host, and he was attacked by the extremists. And then I have Mehr Tarar, a journalist, a freelance journalist, who is working for Daily Times at the moment. I'll ask Mr. Kasuri to give a brief review of his book. Then I will ask the other panelists to respond to this. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Before I go on, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, before I go on to that, there are some people whose presence I'd like to acknowledge. Besides all of you Excellencies, there is Air Marshal Muhammad Azhar Khan, who is perhaps the most outstanding, the most honest and straightforward politician produced by Pakistan. He is present here. It's a misfortune that people say that he did not make it. He made it, and he made it in a big way. Unfortunately, the current generation has not been taught history. But let me say that he's one of those few people in Pakistan whose integrity is entirely above board, whose governance, he was the creator of modern Air Force and the PIA, but was regarded one of the best airlines in the world. So I thought it's a great honor that he has come here to the book launch. Thank you, sir, very much. Then there is Mr. Kulkarni, whose courage I have seen with my own eyes. I was threatened by Shiv Sena, a hard-line Hindu organization, not to land in Bombay when I was in Delhi. But I'm basically a political worker, and my instinct said, no, I will land. And my wife thought I was crazy. She's sitting here, she said, don't go. I said, I will go. But I only asked Mr. Kulkarni, I said, if you want to withdraw the invitation, you can withdraw. He didn't withdraw the invitation. I'm grateful to him. I salute his courage. But when I landed in Bombay, I couldn't believe my eyes. I thought I don't know what happened with the airplane was invaded by the security forces. And I said, what has happened? He said, the airport has been surrounded by Shiv Sena, and we have to get you out. Well, I had more protection than President Musharraf had during 9/11, and that's saying quite a lot, because they said it is Z protection which is provided to threatened prime ministers of India. So, but he didn't have that protection, and they couldn't get to me. They got to him, they dragged him out of his car, they beat him up black and blue, and they plastered his face with black paint. And I thought my book launch was off. Half an hour later, I received a call that I should come. And I saw him with his blackened face, and the fundamentalist Hindu press was saying, ask him to take paint off. And he said, I will not take that paint off until I have blackened Shiv Sena's face throughout the world. And you did succeed in doing that. And before I go, I am very grateful. The two foreign secretaries who were with me, Riaz Khokhar and Riaz Muhammad Khan, were excellent foreign secretaries. I could not have achieved half of what I did if I did not have them there. Thank you very much, both of you, for being here. Now I just come, sorry, I had to say these things. Okay. Now I come to the book. The book, he says, is a long one. Before I wrote the book, I consulted other foreign ministers. I consulted what my counterpart, Condoleezza Rice, had written, what the one who followed me, Hillary Clinton, had written, and what Kissinger had written, and what some other foreign ministers had written. All those books are long because you have to cover not one country but many countries. But I've taken the precaution that each section is not more than 15 or 16 pages. So don't be deterred by the size of the book. You can pick anything, read when you like, and it's self-contained. Secondly, the important thing about the book is that whereas I've dealt with all Pakistan's international relations, United States, Afghanistan, the Muslim world, EU, but as was obvious, it would be focused, everybody would be focused on Pakistan-India relations. Because let me say that our period witnessed the most successful peace process between the two countries since independence. And in order to make sure that I was not contradicted, I sent advance copies of the book to President of India, Pranab Mukherjee, who was my counterpart, to Vice President, to Mr. Advani, who was then when the process started, he was the Deputy Prime Minister. And of course, on the Pakistani side, to President Musharraf, to General Kiani, who was sitting with me representing the ISI, and General Ahsan Salim Hayat, who headed the military, and of course Foreign Secretary Riaz Muhammad Khan, because we used to sit around the table, and these were the people who could deny what I have written. Not one person on the Indian or Pakistani side has denied a single word of what I stated in my account. In fact, they all came to my book launch. President Musharraf launched the book. Prime Minister Manmohan Singh Advani were there, the President of India, my counterpart, invited me, as did the Vice President of India. So I can say that none of those who attended the launch have contradicted a word of what I have written. Now, what are the important factors? The Indians used to tell me, there'll be no peace. I said, why? Because of the Pakistan army. They said the army has a vested interest, it will not allow peace between Pakistan and India. So I decided to write a chapter on the Pakistan army and what I saw it. And I'll leave it to the question and answer because I know he's getting uneasy. So I leave that to question and answer. I've given the answers in the chapter on the Pakistan army. Foreign Office. I was told, oh, what does the Foreign Office do? ISI does everything. It's utter nonsense. And I have stated in the book that there can be no worthwhile foreign policy without an input from the Foreign Office. They are trained for it, and the most informed people in the country, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, tell you, the two most informed are the Foreign Secretary and the Foreign Minister. If they do their work at 9 in the morning, they have cables from all over the world by people who've been trained to analyze. Information is power, so nobody can replace the Foreign Office. Yes, when there is a situation, when the situation on the border is bad, then things of this nature do happen in America, in Britain, even in India. The army starts asserting itself in areas which are focus of tension. Then we come to the Kashmir settlement. All I'm going to do, because there will be a question and answer session, I will just refer to the basic features. And basic features, why did I arrive at that? The reason is very simple. I met the Kashmiris privately. I met them in India, Pakistan, and I met them in third capitals of the world secretly. If I were to disclose their names, their careers would be at stake. But why did I do that? Not to create mischief, but to understand from people in occupied Kashmir, their leaders, that this is what we were working on, the broad parameters, so that they do not reject it when we announce it. I didn't wish them to be surprised. Not one of the leaders except Sayyid Ali Shah Gilani, and even he has not denied, I consulted him, but apart from him, not one of them has gone on the TV or radio. I had left office many years ago to attack what we had done then. So basically, I would say if you give me, you have to decide time. So what I was saying to you is that Kashmir framework, I don't think our work has been wasted. Why? Because you cannot reinvent the wheel. People have no options. Pakistan and India, I had predicted in my book that neither Pakistan nor India has an option but to talk. So people said, what about Modi? I wrote in the book, because he was very belligerent talk before elections, after become prime minister. I said he has no option but to talk to Pakistan. And when he came to Lahore, everybody was surprised. If you want to know the reasons, I stated in the book briefly. It's the military parity, not parity. The disparity is not so great, it's 2-1. Number 2, there's nuclear parity. Number 3, which is very dangerous, both possess second strike capability. And because there were some people in India who are advocating cold start doctrine, I won't talk of that at the moment. If you want, you can ask in the question answer session. The Pakistan army responded with tactical nuclear weapons. Then both countries have another capability that people do not talk about. They have acquired a special capability to destabilize each other. So I can tell you one thing, that these countries have no option, and when I say no option, I assume that we are talking of sane people. They have no option but to resume talks. The quicker they do that, the better. And my feeling is when there are statesmen on both the sides, they will have to go back to the same. It will serve as a benchmark for the future. Thank you very much for your patience, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you, Mr. Kasuri. Now I'll bring Mr. Kulkarni. What has been, this book has created a lot of stir in India as well. There have been many articles and there have also been some criticism of that. Do you think actually we can, the two countries can pick up the thread from where they left in 2007?
Excellencies, friends, ladies and gentlemen, I want to begin by recognizing the presence here of India's young High Commissioner, His Excellency Gautam Bambawale. I'm very happy that he is here. And although the title of the book is Neither a Hawk Nor a Dove, I find that everyone sitting here is a dove. You know, Kasuri Sahab himself, I call him as a messenger of peace. His book is a message of peace between India and Pakistan. But sitting next to me, Qazi Sahab, High Commissioner, he played a pivotal role in bringing about the Agra summit. And I know the role that he played. And then there is Mehr Tarar, and we both, for all that we say on the social media, we get a lot of brickbats both in India and Pakistan, but we are determined to promote the cause of peace. Now, coming to your question, continuity. Mature nations have to work on the principle of continuity. Governments come and go, prime ministers come and go, even military chiefs come and go. But there has to be continuity. And as Kasuri Sahab mentioned, the effort that was put in by the governments, the leaderships and the interlocutors of India and Pakistan is a very precious contribution to the peace effort. And now there's a new government in India, but just 2 years old. And Prime Minister Narendra Modi, I can tell you, to all those, if there are any skeptics here, he is determined to work for peace between India and Pakistan. He took a very bold, unconventional step of coming to Lahore. And what he said is very interesting. He said, "Ab to aana jana chalta hi rahega." तो ये आना जाना चलता ही रहेगा in spite of Pathankots, in spite of such incidents, because there is a certain degree of determination. And what Kasuri Sahab said, this is not an option. Peace between India and Pakistan is not an option, it is an imperative. After so many years, so many decades rather, we as mature nations, inheritors of one of the richest civilizations in the world, we have to find a solution, and we will find a solution. The framework for the solution is already there in the, as far as Kashmir. Kashmir, I want to say, is indeed the core issue between India and Pakistan. There is no denying it. We have inherited this problem from 1947, and together we have to solve it. It is there in the Simla Pact mandates India and Pakistan to find a lasting solution bilaterally and non-militarily, क्योंकि military जंग कोई solution नहीं हो सकता. मैंने सुना यहाँ आने के बाद कि लोक विरसा was founded by फैज़ अहमद फैज़. अब मुझे फैज़ अहमद फैज़ की 2 लाइन्स याद आती है, जंग किसी भी मसले का हल नहीं हो सकता, क्योंकि जंग अपने आप में एक मसला है. War cannot be a solution to any problem, because war itself is a problem, and war also by other means, and by this I mean war by means of terrorism. Terrorism also cannot be a solution to any problem, and therefore we are on the right track. Let's be patient, let's have a positive attitude, and our governments and our civil societies will definitely find a solution to the Kashmir issue, to the issue of terrorism, and we will not remain prisoners of the past, and we will create new history between India and Pakistan.
Thank you, Mr. Kulkarni. You have shown a lot of optimism, and it's quite heartening to hear that things can still move forward. Now I'll ask Mr. Ashraf Jehangir Qazi. You are also a High Commissioner in India when Agra Summit took place. So going back from that, how do you think actually the things changed so quickly that a few years later we come to this point where the two countries could engage in back channel for so long and also come to very close to some kind of agreement?
Thank you very much, and I'm very privileged to have been invited here on this august occasion for the launch of a very, very sensible book and by a true gentleman, a diplomat, and if I may say so, sir, one of our finest foreign ministers that we've had in Pakistan, not because you're necessarily intellectually a genius, it's because of the utter sincerity which you have brought, combined with a high degree of intelligence, of course. But I would have added just a phrase, it would have spoiled the title, but it expresses what my view about you is, that you're neither a hawk, in other words, you're not for war and rigidity, nor a dove, which is a good thing for peace, but implies weakness and feebleness. You are what I would call a pragmatic realist, that you want to do the right thing, but you have to take account of realities. Now, we all know, it's easy for India and Pakistan, we've done it several times, what are our common desires in terms of the relationships with each other? We want peace, we want travel, we want trade, we want people-to-people contacts, we want to meet the challenges of the 21st century together, we want to develop modern communities in our respective countries, we want all the goodies, and we can articulate them. But we are in fact faced with certain realities, realities that are true regarding the relations between the two countries and realities at home in both countries. Now, the core issue, as Kulkarni Sahab has mentioned, from the point of view India has been what they say is terrorism, particularly in the context of India-Pakistan relations. Generally, as far as the general phenomenon of terrorism, India and Pakistan are on the same side. We're against world terrorism. But within the context of India-Pakistan relations, what is regarded by some in Pakistan and others as something akin to a struggle for rights, resistance on behalf of rights, which is sanctioned by international law and General Assembly, UN General Assembly resolutions, is seen by India as acts of terrorism. And what you can have within liberation struggles, you can have acts of terrorism, and when acts of terrorism take place, even if they are within the context of a liberation movement, they're still illegal, totally impermissible, and it should never be resorted to. Struggle, including armed struggle, is of itself not illegitimate. However, we need to take into account the fact that we are both developing societies, the fact that we have massive poverty in our countries, the fact that we have leaders of the caliber of Khurshid, Kasuri here and many in India. We should be able to shortcut these acts of struggle in order to try and take longer-term decisions on behalf of the interests of our respective people. This is easily understood intellectually, but in practice it doesn't happen. Now I'll tell you about Kashmir. In 70 years almost, we have not got a common definition, a shared definition of what the Kashmir problem is. If you ask an Indian, what is the Kashmir problem? It is something which is in direct opposition to what Pakistan sees it. So how do we sort of begin to progress when we don't have a common definition of what this core issue is between us? Now, it doesn't mean it's impossible. It does mean that we have to think more imaginatively, and we have to think in terms of the longer term, because when I was in China, I remember there was a retired Chinese diplomat, very wise person. He told me that all problems confronting China, and China has 5,000 years of history from which to learn. It's seen triumph, it's seen disaster, it's seen unity, it's seen separation. The mandate of heaven has been there with certain empires, and then it's been withdrawn. There's been pestilence, famine, and plenitude and plenty. It has been when you have to categorize your challenges in three categories: those that must be addressed immediately because they can't brook delay; those that need some consideration, you need, in order for you to understand what the problem is, prepare yourself for it, and then you address it. And there are other issues which have to be addressed by the next generation, since the preconditions for a resolution of those issues may not be available today. Now the Chinese friend said, you, Pakistan, he was talking to me, you, Pakistan, have to decide which problem, and you've been talking about Kashmir, which category does Kashmir belong? Do you have a solution today? If so, go for it. Do you have a solution within a year or two? If so, go for it. If this is something that has gradually got to evolve, emerge, then that's what you have to understand and communicate to your people. This is where I think the leaderships of both countries have sometimes failed to provide the context within which we need to address this problem. I think India's policy of saying, this is what the situation is. Now Pakistan has to do all the adaptation to the actual reality. India's position is what it is. It cannot change. It will never change. Now, and Pakistan's position has been, we believe with justification, the UN resolutions, etc., etc. Now, we have to. The UN resolutions you don't need to set aside, but the UN resolutions themselves are not going to deliver you Kashmir. What is going to deliver us Kashmir, ultimately, is a process of negotiations in which we are working towards what can be sold in Srinagar, what can be sold in Muzaffarabad, what can be sold in Delhi, what can be sold in Islamabad. Now, how can this be done? It's not going to be easy, but if you are, and now this is our problem, there's too much politics. There are sometimes no single centers of decision making. We've seen what happens. Good is immediately followed by something which thwarts that good. We've seen it after Lahore. After Lahore we had Kargil. After the back channel we had, General Musharraf facing problems inside Pakistan and Mumbai. And then after Modi's visit here, we've seen Pathankot. So there is a problem. That problem you cannot wish away. It is there. And unless we find a political solution to these problems inside Pakistan, inside India, based on an acknowledged, articulated desire to come closer together and to convince our respective publics that close relations with each other are a domestic priority, without which we will not be able to reach the aspirations we have for our own respective peoples. Unless we are able to do this, clearly we will always wish and pine for better relations without ever achieving them. And that is why India-Pakistan relations have been a vicious circle, throughout our 7 decades almost. And to break out of this is going to require courage, imagination. And I think your book, sir, does give us an idea of how we need to go forward. As my colleague Riaz Muhammad Khan has said, can we resolve it through war? No. Can we resolve it through asymmetric strategies? No. Can we resolve it immediately through talks, discussions? No. So it has to be a longer term discussion, broadening of views, mutual accommodation for a larger good that we share. And in the 21st century, given the challenges that we face, Pakistan will be 350 million people by 2050. It should not be difficult to contextualize the challenge that Kashmir represents and to approach it accordingly. Thank you.
Mehr, India and Pakistan's relationship is going in a circle, as Mr. Ashraf Jehangir Qazi has just pointed out. How do you think it can be bred? As a journalist, you have been covering India-Pakistan relations too.
Thank you. Not as a journalist, but I have been writing about it a lot, and I have spoken to many Pakistanis and Indians about it on social media, in person. And the most important thing, as far as I am concerned, is that both the countries have a problem with the word Kashmir. Pakistan does not want to talk to India without mentioning Kashmir as the first issue. Kashmir is the fundamental issue, but Pakistan needs to start talking to India without this flag, without waving this flag all the time, because Kashmir will be talked about as soon as a comprehensive dialogue is initiated between the two countries. And Indians, on the other hand, refuse to simply acknowledge that there is a problem that needs to be resolved. This is what I have seen on their media. This is what I have seen on social media. This is what I have seen. But I mean, this is what I've observed whenever I've spoken to anybody who has an opinion in India. They think that Pakistanis do not have a right to talk about Kashmir that is part of India. One, I do believe that we need to move away from rhetorics. We need to move away from, oh, things are going to get better, this should happen, that should happen. It's about time that we actually started to do things. And to me, the most important thing would be to have an economic package as far as the two countries are concerned. But there should be a great deal of trade between the two countries. There are many Pakistani businessmen who would like to do business in India and vice versa. I think anybody who has a bit of sense can see that China and India, who are the real rivals, and not Pakistan and India because of their sizes. I don't think India is our rival as far as India's size and resources and outlook is concerned. We should be focusing on changing how we are going to have a better relationship with India in a very practical manner. Of course, there should be more people-to-people contact. There are a number of Pakistanis who want to go to India for one reason or the other, for religious, for business, for sightseeing purposes, and they can't even apply for a visa because they do not know anybody in India. And the same goes for very well-known people in India. I was talking to a person who used to work for Chief Minister Sheila Dixit, somebody who travels all over the world, but he cannot come to Pakistan because he doesn't know anybody in Pakistan. And I think that should change in 2016, that two countries that are literally a few feet from one another, when you cross Wagah into Atari, cannot visit one another. I think once there is a lot of business engagement between the two countries, things will change, because but again, the biggest example is China and India. Look at the amount of trade China does in India and vice versa. Pakistan would be talking about Kashmir once Pakistan is talking to India, but Pakistan does not need to say that we're not going to talk to you about anything as long as unless you mention the issue of Kashmir right away. I think it's counterproductive, and basically that's all I have to say. But because everybody else has said whatever I need to say.
Mr. Kasuri, in your book you have said that two sides had fundamentally agreed on 4-point formula, that envisaged demilitarization and joint control of Kashmir, while avoiding the redrawing of the border. It suggested making the line of control irrelevant, allowing Kashmiris on both sides to move freely. So now actually that was very drastic actually. I mean, if you think now that we have not been able to talk even to these two countries, was it workable, this formula?
First of all, just a bit of correction. It was joint mechanism, not joint control. That's the first. Otherwise, I agree with what you said. But first of all, I would like to, Ambassador Ashraf Jehangir Qazi said some things. And in order to highlight what I have tried to achieve, say in the book, you see the real conundrum, India is a status quo power. What does status quo means? It means you keep what you have, we keep what we have. Sounds eminently sensible. We fought so many wars. I have listed 9 war and near war situations. So why not accept it? Here's the problem. It's not a question of territorial exchanges. It's a question of human rights of living human beings, Kashmiris. Now, what do you do with that? Is ISI behind the current turmoil in Kashmir? Is ISI supplying Pakistani flags to them? Is ISI saying cheer for the Pakistani team? No, there is a problem in Kashmir. Now, if there's a problem in Kashmir, it needs to be rectified. Of course, I agree with Mehr when she says you cannot be focused on one. But you know, I'd like to pay the Foreign Office of Pakistan a great compliment. They say that the best form of flattery is when somebody starts copying you. We used to say previously, Kashmir and nothing else. Now we brought India to say, terrorism and nothing else. I mean, how can this be sustainable? After all, after many decades, we arrived at the sensible conclusion that you have to address each other's concerns, Pakistan's and India's. There's no other way of moving. And hence, the mechanism of composite dialogue was devised. It's changed names, comprehensive bilateral dialogue, comprehensive dialogue means exactly the same. Issues of concern to both the countries. And if you do that, one of the Indian diplomats, I read, he said it's amazing. India started saying what Pakistan was used to say. That is not maintainable. It will not work, I predict. Furthermore, when governments say, somebody on the panel said, Pakistan says nothing except Kashmir and India says Kashmir is not an issue. This actually is not true. When you talk to them privately, and when you talk to, and I was talking on behalf of Pakistan privately, Indians recognize that Kashmir is an issue. It needs to be resolved. Otherwise, how could we have achieved not 4 but about agreement on 12 points? Some of them entirely to do with the situation in Indian Jammu and Kashmir, like holding of elections to be monitored by international monitors. I mean, so obviously Indians recognize, they may say it's not an issue, that's a public relations exercise. Another point that needs to be pointed out, you need a narrative to sustain anything. I was sometimes, the Foreign Office of Pakistan, the many top people in Pakistan were angry with me, the Indian Foreign Office, the Indian government very angry with me. They said this fellow keeps on talking. Why does he talk? Because they are used to talking in secret. I knew that if you have to change the mindset of people of Pakistan and India, somebody has to talk and give people a hope. But if you simply say, Indians say Kashmir is not an issue, we say we will discuss nothing but Kashmir. So this is ridiculous. So I used to carry on, and I've written an entire chapter on the need for public diplomacy and media, the role of media in modern foreign conduct of foreign policy. There is no way that any country can make any progress unless its people are satisfied. People will not be satisfied if the leaders out of cowardice keep quiet. They have to tell people the truth. But then the truth has to be based on principles of justice and equity. Truth never means you accept one side's version. Therefore, I'll say there are 11 or 12 points, but since you refer to 4, because President Musharraf refers to 4, Dr. Manmohan Singh refers to 4, but what were they basically? I knew one thing. If the people of occupied Jammu and Kashmir rejected what we produced, it was curtains. People of Pakistan would immediately reject it. So the first thing I had to do was to find out if it was not the best, the conundrum. I think Ashraf, Jehangir, Qazi, he excellently summed up. He said, how do you produce something which is acceptable in Islamabad, in Delhi, in Muzaffarabad and Srinagar? Well, obviously that is the issue. And that has to be faced. And we tried to face it. If you look at the details, after all, the government of India has agreed to it. Let me say another thing. The establishment of India has agreed. It's not the government of Pakistan. It's not Musharraf government. I am saying the establishment of Pakistan has agreed, because we could have achieved nothing if ISI and the army had not been on board. So one thing is for public consumption. What does the Pakistan army want? It wants a resolution of Jammu and Kashmir and normal relations with India based on a resolution of Jammu on principles, Jammu and Kashmir principles of equity and on the basis of self-respect and equality. Is that asking for too much? And that is what we were trying to achieve, to satisfy Srinagar, Muzaffarabad, Delhi and Islamabad. But let me say, no solution, no genius can produce a solution which will be accepted by 100% of people of Pakistan, India, Srinagar and Muzaffarabad. You have to aim at something which about 70-80% will accept. And I know that currently the atmospherics are so bad that we're not even talking to each other. So people are saying, how the hell can you achieve that? All you have to do is first make progress, and it can be through various means. We know all the CBMs, I don't have to repeat them. There are a lot of diplomats sitting here. CBMs, yes, but you have to talk on real issues. So the only issue is going back to the composite dialogue, addressing all issues. And I realized something very strange, that when we were talking, Stark started moving, and something happened which I had not realized. It is the sheer number of meetings that were taking place in Lahore, in Islamabad and Delhi. India, Pakistan, SAARC, dealing with agriculture, science, technology. So what it created a new dynamic, the dynamic of for peace, that there were so many people who were talking about positive things. So when you talk about positive things, now let me give you one illustration of what positive talk and positive action can do. India and Pakistan cricket field is a substitute for war. There was a time when we beat them regularly. Now it seems they are beating us regularly. Now I'm talking also of a time when we were beating them regularly. But in Lahore, the capital of Punjab, supposed to be the most chauvinistic, India beat Pakistan. Some of my Indian friends were refusing to leave the stadium. I was there. They were scared of public reaction. They couldn't believe their eyes. The young men of Lahore ran across the field with Pakistani and Indian flags. This happened in 2006. Why? Because there was a positive narrative. If you don't talk of hate, of course, they would like to stone each other. Therefore, I think there is hope. So basically, I was saying that I had to satisfy the people of occupied Kashmir. So talk to their leaders, and what did they say to me? They said, for heaven's sake, get the Indian army out. Our women are not safe. They have become psychological wrecks. Get the Indian army out. So when we talked to them, he said, who the hell are you? You are nobody to tell us. I said, if we are nobody, there is no deal. That's why it took us 3 years. Because everything that came was referred to everybody. For the Foreign Office, Riaz Mahmud Khan. For ISI, General Kiani. For the Army, General Hassan Salim Hayat. Everybody would compare notes, come and sit again. It took 3 years. How can I believe that this exercise was not taking place in India also? Manmohan Singh had to consult, of course, apart from Defense Committee, the Cabinet, also his security people. I mean, he didn't tell me. This is a very normal guess. So that means that what happened cleared the so-called permanent government, which means the establishment. And why did I come to that conclusion? You see, after all, as the army or the ISI, they have their way of describing national interest. Politician has his own way of describing national interest. The great credit to Musharraf I'll give is become unfashionable to give credit to anybody who's lost power. The best thing is to kick him all the time. No. The great thing about Musharraf was that if I disagreed with somebody, he'd make us sit on the table with the army, ISI, the Foreign Office, and we would talk about it. And therefore, since everyone ostensibly and really was talking about Pakistan's national interest, it was possible to accept an argument if it had weight, if it had merit. And I therefore tell you that it was not such a difficult, it took 3 years. So ultimately the Indians agreed. They said, so what was the agreement? We'll take the military out from urban areas and slowly from the other areas and thin it to such an extent only for the LOC.
Time is running out of questions. So
Okay.
time is already running out, and we must have lots of questions.
Oh, I'm ready.
50 actually I will ask you. Now it said that for India, the major issue is
The major issue is of terrorism. So can we deal the issue of terrorism without addressing the key problems? I think I just want 2 minutes from you.
Yeah, I'll just take 3 minutes because I want to say he mentioned cricket. There's a book by Stanley Wolpert. It says, Shooting for a Century, India-Pakistan Conundrum. The title, Shooting for a Century, means that India and Pakistan, even by 2047, when we both will, celebrate 100 years of our independence, we'll still be fighting over Kashmir. Now, we must prove the Stanley Wolperts wrong. We must not wait for 2047 to solve our problem. We must solve it now. Neither India nor Pakistan, we are great cricketing nations, but we must get out of this game of blaming each other and make both India, Pakistan and the people of Kashmir win. Now coming to your question, terrorism is not just a major issue for us, terrorism is a major issue for Pakistan. Terrorism is a major issue for the entire world. And therefore, my earnest, this is, every Indian says so, and I'm sure that all peace-loving people of Pakistan also, let's not, terrorism, let's cooperate to eliminate terrorism from the holy land of South Asia, together.
Mr. Another 2 minutes, could it have happened? I mean, it was General Musharraf who took the initiative, and he showed a lot of flexibility, a lot more. Do you think any Pakistani political leader could have shown that kind of flexibility in dealing with India?
I think over the longer run, if we articulated our position clearly and consistently, and were willing to stand up to hostile opinion on the basis of a longer term benefits to both countries. And that's why I said in the context of 2050 and the challenges that are going to confront Pakistan, you do need a working relationship with India, because if we don't have a working relationship with India, which is based on progress towards some kind of normality, you cannot successfully address your fundamental challenges at home. That is the position that China took when it opened up and with its policy of opening up and reform in 1979. It decided that a critical requirement for the successful implementation of its agenda inside China would be a peaceful neighborhood. And apart from Pakistan, it had problems with every single neighbor of itself. So if you contextualize the problem of foreign policy and the problem of Kashmir within this larger picture and stand up and articulate it, you can begin to make progress. However, you're going to have to talk clearly and consistently and sincerely about the status of the UN resolutions in our policy. And because the UN resolutions, the way we see it, is in the context of changing the territorial status quo, which is a no-no for India. So we have to have some kind of concept of how do we square this particular circle. There are ways to do it. Absolutely, there are ways to do it. It's not impossible, but I don't see anybody giving enough attention to this problem and articulating it. So I believe correctly that the book's suggestion that we need to concentrate as much on human rights, because a solution of Kashmir is not available today, won't be available tomorrow, and maybe not for a long time. It is possible that we will never have a solution of Kashmir, but that should not preclude the possibility of better relations. Why? Not because we regard India as necessarily a friend of Pakistan. I hope one day we do become friends. But it is a requirement of Pakistan's own domestic agenda. You cannot achieve anything of your domestic agenda in a state of confrontation with a country which is 7 times your size in population, and being both nuclear countries, and we don't have decent nuclear doctrines to accompany that. Obviously, we are just whistling in the wind and refusing to address certain aspects of our policies which need to be addressed, articulated and placed before the people. So I do agree, it's not easy, it has to be done, and very often, and I will say this, politicians who don't feel confident with respect to their domestic standing will never stand up and tell the truth to the people about the difficult choices that have to be made.
Thank you. Only 1 minute, second.
In the last few days, 5 or 6 Kashmiris have died. It doesn't work, apparently. Okay. First 2 boys were killed, then another one was killed, a woman was killed. Other than a few channels in India, not a lot of noise has been made about the deaths of 6 civilians in India. And a lot of Indians say that the army is in India because of Pakistan. And so you people have no right to highlight whatever you think Pakistan Indian Army is doing in Kashmir. I have noticed this, that when Prime Minister Modi came to India, the one person who was very happy about his visit was Umar Abdullah, and the other person who was very happy was Mirwais Umar Farooq. He is a separatist, and this one is somebody who's been part of the Indian Kashmir power paradigm for a long time. What they say is that between Pakistan and India, the entity that suffers the most is Kashmir, and both the countries need to stop treating India as a power pawn.
Go to the audience, identify yourself and be brief in your comments or questions. Sir, Mike.
Sir, I am Sarwar Naqvi, former ambassador. I have had the privilege of working under you, and I have also had the privilege of reviewing your book for the Herald magazine in Karachi. I am going to ask you something totally different. You have talked a lot about the substance of the book. I want to know your experience of writing the book. Okay. How did you do it? How did you go ahead with it? And how much time it took? And what were the challenges that you faced in writing it?
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
इश्तियाक अहमद साहब प्रोफेसर आप जानते हैं उनको जानते हैं ना प्रोफेसर
My name is Ishtiaq Ahmed, and I've had the privilege of reviewing Khurshid Kasuri Saab's book for the Friday Times. And one thing which was not mentioned here is that when the negotiations took place, both sides had come to this understanding that an independent Kashmir was out of the question. Now, if that is what you wrote in your book, the solution which you proposed then, more or less, is that the line of control, of course, will become meaningless in the long run, but it becomes the area of control for the 2 states in which the 15 years that you propose would be then spent to build up confidence and trust. Is that true?
Excuse me?
Ali, खाना खा के जाना.
Thank you. Assalamu alaikum, Naseem Zahra. It's a great book, Khurshid Kasuri Saab, whatever he writes, the reporting at that time and the comments at that time and what we were seeing almost firsthand, everything I think that has been documented, as Khurshid Saab says, Kasuri Saab says, has not been questioned and hence is correct. Kasuri Saab, did General Musharraf ever discuss with you what prompted him to do Kargil? Because what Ambassador Qazi just said, that when politicians are confident, they take initiatives and they do what is needed. The fact is that General Musharraf, and for good reason, I mean, I think that what General Musharraf and you did and the 4 points on Kashmir are genuinely progress ahead. We often don't focus on it. If you go to Chakoti and see that actually along the LOC, there is trade that is going on and Kashmiris are moving back and forth. So progress on Kashmir issue has been made. Let's be clear that that's happened now. the ultimate, I don't want to waste more time, but I mean, that's a long discussion. Ultimately, the solution, and Qazi Sahib said there's no solution. The solution is that the Kashmiris have access to each other, and that Kashmir becomes one Kashmir, and they look at both the countries as countries that are not controlling their destiny and yet have semi-control. But Kasuri Sahib, ultimately, are we not looking at leadership from both sides, on both sides, to take the Pakistan-India peace process forward? When Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif went to Delhi at the inauguration, at the oath taking of Mr. Modi, Prime Minister Modi, when we were there, I spoke to the Prime Minister. He'd just come back after a meeting with Mr. Modi, and he said, Mr. Modi has said, Prime Minister Modi has said, we will discuss Kashmir, and I want to work on making the Muslims in India, they should have, we should work for Muslims all over the world. They should have Quran in one hand and a computer on the other, in the other hand. And even before Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif had left Delhi, your foreign secretary had given a press conference and said, okay, so let me just cut it. So essentially the foreign secretary hijacked the whole process. The whole thing went to nowhere. And right now what we see is a deadlock. In terms of Pakistan, last point, in terms of what happened in Pakistan, Zahid, the fact is that Nawaz Sharif was trying to do exactly the same thing, which was hijacked through Kargil, and so that power dynamics within countries is critical also.
Three questions. एक तो सरवर साहब का है. Excuse me. एक तो responding to you.
Okay. Brief.
Hello. You said what? General Sahab ka bhi ek sawal hai.
Can I ask a question? Well, I think, India's insistence on terrorism and Pakistan's priority on Kashmir obviously are both interlinked, but neither of them are interested in talking to each other. So what really is, this is the challenge, that I think they are just using these cliches in order not to undertake a very serious negotiation on both the issues. One more point I want to make is, I think General Musharraf's 4-point plan was a terrible compromise because of his guilt complex of Kargil. And I think, because of Kargil, he went to the extent of acceding to this 4-point agenda without understanding the grave implications of a military ruler undertaking a position in which he had no legitimacy either in ruling the country or in undertaking a position on Kashmir. And I want Mr. Kasuri to answer this, because he is a politician, and how does he really justify this?
Thank you. Well, I'll answer all four, and since if I miss anything, I'd first give you the gist of your question before you say what prompted me to write the book. The following: there were only three people, President Musharraf, Prime Minister Manmohan Singh, I, and of course you can say the foreign secretaries, who knew everything on what was happening in the front channel and the back channel. These were 3 points. Why do I leave the Indian foreign ministers out? Because there are 3 Indian foreign ministers. The last one was President Mukherjee. Prior to that was Mr. Natwar Singh, and then Mr. Yashwant Sinha. So none of them knew the entire picture. So really the burden fell on me as a politician, or on Dr. Manmohan Singh or President Musharraf. None of them, I thought, will find the time or maybe even the inclination, because it requires a lot of hard work. Somebody had to put it on record for posterity, and for historians, that is what prompted me. Number 2, it's very difficult to write a book. I dictated in the first 9 or 10 months what turned out to be 2,500 pages. I had to employ an internal editor to edit it down to the current size, 850 or whatever. Now, it's not like a long essay. Everything you say has to be supported. Even when I said this, I dug out New York Times, Dawn or Hindu. Are they supporting my statement? So it's very difficult to write a book because everything has to be authenticated. And that's why it took me at least 4 years, if not longer. And I'm grateful to a lot of people, especially the late Ambassador Khalid Mahmud, because unfortunately he is not alive to see the book come out, because what happened is I insisted on accuracy. So even when I had one-to-one meetings, I'd come out of a meeting and I immediately told him, this is what happened. And then when he was not with me in foreign countries, the moment I landed, I told him what had happened. And I kept my own notes. So you have to have notes. The problem sometimes becomes, you have so many notes. So when I asked the Foreign Office, he said, Siddiqui Saab baithe hain. He was my private secretary at that time. I said, Siddiqui Saab, bheje mera kya schedule tha, taaki main ko usme se nikalu. Let me make some sense out of it. He sent me 5 big books, which is like the old edition of Oxford University. Thousands of pages was meaningless. Because of 10:30 to 11, Condoleezza Rice, 9:30 to so, Yashwant Sinha, it really meant nothing. So I had to rely on my notes and then of course my general knowledge of history. So I think I did it for the first reason, and it was a difficult book to write. That's why I took at least 4, if not more years. The second question was by, who asked the second question? Aapne shayad poocha. Ishtiyaq Ahmed Saab ne. So I think first tell me, have I understood your question right? You said that usme the independence of Kashmir has been left out. So let me, so that basically the 2 states would do it in their own interest, and that Kashmiris had somehow interested not being taken care of. I don't know what you meant. आप बता दें क्या कह रहे हैं? आप करीब आके बता दें तो फिर जी 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 जी
नेगोशिएशंस के दौरान
जी
दोनों स्टेट्स ने ये रियलाइज कर लिया कि इंडिपेंडेंट कश्मीर का जो ऑप्शन है वो दोनों को कबूल नहीं।
अच्छा जी।
और जो भी सोल्यूशन आएगा वो फिर जैसे हमने प्रपोज किया है कि 15 साल लगेंगे कॉन्फिडेंस बिल्ड करने में, तो ये जो लाइन ऑफ कंट्रोल है मोर और लेस वुड सर्व एज द 2 areas of control.
Okay. Thank you. Now they are doing
We have for the other session. No, go ahead, please. आप बात कर लें. They are.
Second session. Okay. Well, let me respond to you. They want to start the second session after this. And I have invited a lot of people to lunch, as you know, basically. So the answer to your question is, you hit the nail on the head. 15 years. There's a review mechanism after 15 years. कौन जीता है तेरे जुल्फ के सर होने तक? और 15 साल हैं. If the Kashmiris are satisfied in those 15 years, if the Indians are satisfied, if the Pakistanis are satisfied, lots of things will take care by themselves. And if they do not, only God can tell you what will happen after 15, 25 years. We had to bring things to a state of normalcy. So you have self-answered that I have written in the book. There was a review mechanism. Every year the foreign minister is going to review. At the end of 15 years, there's going to be a general review. If I have time, I'm ready, but if it's up to you.
I think the time is running out and they're already...
I have questions, please.
No.
Can you take my questions?
Sorry?
Can you take my question?
I don't think so, because time is already run out. No, because they are going for...
The General Sahab has asked an important question. He said President Musharraf had no legitimacy to, am I right in trying to work to evolve a settlement or anything? Is that your question? Okay, in a nutshell, that is it, because I don't want to run away. One of the things I never do is run away from a difficult question. Yes, he had none. I had none, we had none, the Foreign Secretary had none, Kiani had none, none of us had, nor did Manmohan Singh. He had none. So what were we doing? We were trying to evolve a framework which would have to present it to the media, to our parliament, first of all our cabinet. But you need to do something outside the gaze of the media, so that those who are opposed to it will not put a negative spin. So I entirely agree with you nobody in India or Pakistan had the right to arrive at a solution of Jammu and Kashmir without referring to the constitutional and political authorities. You are bang right, and I agree with you.
I know you have a lot more questions, but you can ask Kasuri Sahib during lunch. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for attending this session. Copies of Neither a Hawk Nor a Dove are available at the back of the hall. Yes. I did say.
Okay.